Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our discussion of the recent trends in college admissions. We should, have a spirited discussion tonight about, pretty much all things college admissions and, the things we've been seeing recently within that space. I think many of you probably know me. My name is Nick. I'm the founder and owner of First Choice Prep. We're, a tutoring, test prep, and college advising company located in Northern New Jersey, and I am very happy to be joined tonight by our head of college advising, Jay Cha, who has been with the company for a number of years. He is also an elite tutor for us, as well as head of college advising. And over the past decade or more, he has worked with hundreds of students of his own, helping them through the college admissions process and helping them find and get into their first choice schools. Um, Now, before we get started, Jay is going to, of course, take most of the discussion tonight because this is very much his bailiwick. He knows all of this stuff, and I am very much a novice when it comes to this. But I did want to say that, like, just as a general thing, our goal here, the reason that we're doing this webinar, the reason that we have a college advising program in the first place, is because we are always trying to provide our the families that we work with, the students that we work with, the the knowledge and the time that they need. We know that in this line of work, knowledge and time are our students' two biggest assets, and we want to provide that for you guys however we can, whenever we can. And in tonight's discussion, the point is to help you guys, make better decisions in the college admissions process, find the right match for your child, and help position them or help them position themselves to gain admission into the college that is going to be the right fit for them. So tonight, what we're going to be covering is we'll start with the general college landscape, the sort of trends and the things that we've been seeing recently in college admissions generally. We're then going to talk about the most important factors in college admissions, the kinds of things that schools are really looking for. From their applicants in the process. We're going to talk about the personal statement and what colleges are generally looking for there. Talking about extracurriculars. We'll then discuss the numbers, your GPA, your test scores, and then at the end, we'll talk about what you can do now with all of this information and how you can, the steps you can take to best position yourself for the admissions process. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jay. I will be back a little bit later to discuss the standardized testing part of this, and we'll both take your questions at the very end. Oh, and that also reminds me. So if you have questions, we are going to be doing a Q&A at the end of the discussion, but if something pops up in your head and you're worried you're going to forget about it, please type it into the Q&A widget in Zoom there. We're not going to be able to get to the question during the presentation, but we very much will at the end of it. All right. So yeah, Jay, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks everyone for attending the webinar. I want to kick off our webinar by talking to you guys a little bit about some of the insights that we have noticed in the college admissions, process over the recent years. So, the nice thing about wanting to attend a college in the US is that there are just so many options, right? And so almost always you are going to be able to find a school that checks off all of your academic and social needs and wants. But at the same time, it's almost like a double-edged sword, right? Because there are so many options, especially if you are just starting your high school journey or if you're a sophomore, it may be a little bit confusing as to where to even begin, right? How do I even find the schools that, fit my needs, right? And how do I even know what these schools are offering, right? Where do I even sort of begin, right? And when we talk to our sophomores and juniors that are a part of our program, the first thing I tell them is to begin considering whether as of now, you are looking to apply to either public institutions or private institutions. Because depending on the type of school that you're applying to, our strategy for getting into those schools will be very different. right? So public institutions, for example, especially if you are applying from within state, the cost of tuition is going to be far lower than if you were to attend a private institution. And even if you're applying from out of state, in general, the tuition will be a little bit lower than many of the private institutions. On the flip side, private institutions do have a little bit of a more generous financial aid if that is something that you are considering. Now, public institutions, we a lot of times like to sort of call them, the rah-rah schools, right? They have big athletic programs. There's going to be a lot of school events. It's a large student body with a lot of diverse offerings. So if you are looking for that type of school, that type of vibe, energy, right? Maybe public institutions, larger universities is what you're looking for. Now, if you're also looking to apply to study in a STEM subject or in a major that is perhaps a little bit more career specific, like communications or marketing, maybe you also are leaning a little bit more towards larger universities. Now, on the flip side, private universities tend to be, in some ways like an extension of your current high school experience, right? You're going to a school perhaps that's a little bit smaller, usually less than 10,000. You're going to have a bit more of a personal and intimate academic experience where there will be more interactions with your professors. And if you're looking to study in a major that a lot of people sort of move on to graduate or PhD levels, then maybe you want to go to a private institution because you'll likely get more opportunities to develop a relationship with your professors, right? And like, to give you an example, when I was in college, I attended a liberal arts college. When I was a senior, I was in a seminar where it was just my professor and five other students. And the entire seminar for the entire semester was just on us helping the professor write his next book. So, again, it tends to be a little bit more intimate, right? So depending on, what you're looking for, again, our strategies for trying to get into these schools will be a little bit different. So a good place to begin is by first considering, am I more looking for private institutions or am I more looking for public institutions? Now, as you move through your high school journey, right, you're going to initially have a tentative college list of maybe 30 schools, right? And as that list gets trimmed down, eventually you may come down to that one school that literally checks off everything you're looking for in your ideal college experience. And if you do land on that school, a school where it's, what we call our dream college, right? A school that we would absolutely love to attend, then you really want to take advantage of the early decision option. Now, not all schools do offer this option, but many do. And essentially what it is that it's sort of like a contract that you're signing with the college, right? By saying that, hey, I'm applying to your school early decision. If you accept me, I will attend, right? So the decision is binding, which means that you can only apply to one school via early decision. Now, there is a major advantage to applying early decision because you are showing a certain level of commitment to that school. So for, the data is a little bit different depending on, which university it is. But to give you some examples, University of Miami, right? They accept about 60% of their incoming class through the early decision process, right? Tulane, for example, another popular destination for a lot of our students in New Jersey, they accept approximately 5 times the number of students during their early decision process than the regular decision process. So again, there is a competitive advantage of applying to that one school early decision if you have one that is your absolute top, you meet the academic standards that are asked by the college, and you think you have a shot. Okay. Now, keep in mind though that regardless of whether you're trying to apply to a private university or a public university, at the end of the day, your academic performance and test scores are still the most important, right? There are other factors that are considered in the application process that we're going to talk about later on. But ultimately, your GPA and your test scores, whether that's SAT, ACT, or AP exams, they will be the priority because it's almost like an entrance ticket into where everything else is considered, right? Until they become curious, in order for them to be curious about who you are and want to learn more about you, you first have to meet the academic standards that are asked by that specific institution. So, if especially if you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior, right, do your research, right? Demonstrate interest by going on campus tours, attending info sessions, going to college fairs at your school, if there are certain schools that currently stand out to you and you may potentially want to apply to once you become a senior. Let's talk a little bit about the college landscape a little bit. So in recent years, we've been seeing, especially, post-COVID, we've been seeing a dramatic increase in the number of applications across pretty much, most universities nationwide. And what that also means is that we've been seeing an increase in the number of international applicants, okay? So naturally, the size of the school doesn't really change, right? So even though the number of, available spots are pretty much the same, right? There's an increase in number of applications, which means that the acceptance rate has also been going down, right? So if you don't apply, even if you apply early decision, and especially if you apply to a school via early action, we've been seeing that a lot of students get deferred from that process and are moved to the regular decision because colleges are becoming more and more cautious about who they accept, right? They want to make sure that the incoming student body, has a very diverse interest. They come from various backgrounds and are really going to holistically become a big asset to their school, right? Now, with these sort of, difficulties in the acceptance rate that we've been noticing, we've also been seeing that more and more students are applying to public institutions, regardless of whether it's, in state for you or not, right? Because, even just a couple years ago, I think a lot of people thought, perhaps mistakenly, that unless you're from some of these like big states like New York, New Jersey, Texas, or California, right, that public institutions are perhaps not the best academically, right? But we've been seeing in recent years that that is absolutely not true. And in fact, a lot of public universities offer an amazing education and they offer a lot of opportunities that are just as good as most of the private institutions around the country. So, overall, we have a lot of options, like we said before, right? And there's a lot to consider. And so even as early as, end of freshman year or beginning of sophomore year, we really do encourage our students to begin thinking about, just even in the most general sense, right? What you may be looking for in a school. Okay. Now, lastly, I do want to just sort of touch bases that another thing sort of that's very new in the world of applications is that we've been seeing these video interviews that are being introduced. Okay. In the past, interviews for schools that did offer them tended to be with alums, or if you end up visiting the school, sometimes you do an interview with the admissions officers. But in recent years, we've been seeing schools that offer a chance for students to record a 5-minute video of themselves where they get to really pitch who they are and show the colleges, like, what they can offer to their community, right? So it's a new thing that is offered for some universities. So if one of your schools offers them, I definitely encourage you to take advantage of it because it is an opportunity for you to show colleges that you have something to offer more than just numbers. So when we're thinking about the different sort of, I guess, elements that students should be considering when picking out their college list, the first thing that, I always say is begin with the, size and location of the school, right? Firstly, right, I know we briefly already touched on private versus public, but do we want to go to a school that's near home, or do we want to go somewhere really far away, right? Are we looking for a really large university, or are we looking for perhaps liberal arts colleges that are, usually less than about 4,000 students? Am I looking for a campus that's very urban, or am I looking for a university that's more in a suburban setting, right? Do I want a school like that has a more of a traditional campus, right? Like, for example, Baylor University in Texas has one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. And it's, sort of what I would characterize as like a traditional campus, right? On the flip side, we have a school like Boston University, right, which is very much sort of weaved into the city, and you get to sort of experience almost like an adult life from the get-go, right, living amongst all the sort of working people of that city. The next thing to obviously consider is the acceptance rate and the academic opportunity, right? These two sort of go hand in hand, right? We want to make sure that our current profile meets the standards of the schools that we are trying to apply to, right? If the school has, the more selective a school is, obviously, the higher the standards will be in terms of your GPA and test score. So we want to make sure that based on your current profile, again, in terms of GPA or test score, it meets the sort of requirements that are typically asked by that school. Now, a great place to sort of check this is in somewhere called the Common Data Set. Okay, so every university, every single year needs to provide an up-to-date common data set where they provide the numbers on the types of students that they accepted for that year, including the number of applications, the number of accepted students, the number of students that actually ended up enrolling in the school post-acceptance, the average GPA, average test scores, all of the sort of numbers associated with the admissions process. So definitely utilize the common data set, as it'll give you a lot of information on whether or not you are in the competitive pool. Now, the next thing to consider is the academic opportunity, right? Obviously, you have to attend a school where the major that you want to study is actually offered, right? In general, the larger the university, the larger the university, the more sort of majors that are offered. Whereas the smaller the university, you may often see some of the more, I guess, traditional majors that all of us know about. The next thing to consider is extracurriculars, right? Is the school that I'm trying to attend, does it have a lot of clubs and organizations that relate to my academic interests, right? What about if you are an athlete in high school, but then you're not necessarily trying to play competitively in college? Maybe you want to join club sport level, right? Does the school have a pretty lively, club level intramural soccer or basketball or whatever sport that you're interested in, right? And also to sort of consider in the extracurricular is the opportunities for outside of the classroom academic experiences, such as research opportunities or study abroad opportunities, right? Depending on the major, some schools will limit certain study abroad opportunities to that major. So depending on what you want to study, you want to look into whether if you want to study abroad, whether that is available, and if so, where, right? Student life, we briefly touched on it earlier, but what am I doing outside of the classroom time, right? In my downtime, am I looking to get a part-time job, right? And if so, are there on-campus jobs available? Are there off-campus jobs available? What are students doing during their leisure time, right? We want to make sure that because college is going to be your home for the next 4 years, you want to make sure that, outside of studying hours, there's also plenty for you to do that fit your personality and needs. Now, the last sort of two things to consider are future career path. Obviously, upon completion of your undergraduate studies, you want to consider how prepared is the college in terms of getting me ready for my first job or for my next level of education. A lot of times the school's career center is a good place where you can look into the sort of data on, what percentage of students within my major end up getting a job, what percentage of, the my majors end up pursuing a higher education. You can also find information about, the different ways in which the Career Center helps juniors or seniors find really coveted internships, whereby if you do well in those internships, you have a full-time job offer waiting for you upon graduating. And of course, lastly, affordability, right? It's something that we always have to keep in mind because US colleges, they are very expensive. And in addition to just pure tuition, you also want to consider the cost of living, right? You want to look into whether a lot of students tend to live on campus. If you're looking to live off campus, are there a variety of options available? Right? What about food, right? Do most students tend to cook in their dormitories? Do they dine out? Are there a lot of dining options available, within the campus, right? So this all falls under the umbrella of affordability. And especially as you narrow down your college list into what would be sort of your final list of schools that you'll be applying to, I think this is definitely the last step that you want to make sure that, especially for parents, it's something that seems feasible. Next, let's talk a little bit about sort of the big picture, right? So considering everything that we discussed, right? First and foremost, right, we want to make sure that the school is a good fit, both academically and socially. Again, keep in mind, it is going to be your home for the next 4 years. You want to make sure that you're in a place where your peers and faculty will intellectually stimulate you, and outside of the classroom, you are having fun, and in general, you will be very happy, right? The second thing is make sure that whatever you want to study, right, there is a path waiting for you upon completion of your studies, right? You want to make sure that major at that school is a very competitive program, and it's going to set you up for success once you enter the real world, perhaps, and enter the workforce, right? And lastly, right, your peers, right? When you visit campuses, especially, right, definitely do not go on campus tours over the summer or when colleges are on break, because you're going to go to an essentially dead campus, right? You want to go when the school year is active, and you want to just kind of get a general sense of the vibe, right? Do students seem really focused, right? Like super zoned in? Is a particular campus just seem very lively, where there's a lot of like tables set up outside and a lot of students studying on grass, right? You want to sort of get a vibe for the school and make sure that this is the type of thing that you're looking for when you become a college student. So now that you're a senior, right, the next thing to sort of talk about is understanding what colleges want, right? Even though our chart here sort of shows a circle graph, I almost like to think of the admissions process as kind of like a hierarchy pyramid, right? Where up at the top, the most important is your GPA and test scores. Again, this is your entrance ticket, right? Unless you have the numbers, a lot of colleges, many times, they won't even go on to read your college essays, right? So they don't want to learn about you unless they know that you can sort of fit their academic standards. And after the GPA and test scores, what typically comes afterwards is your college essays, right? Your college essays, we're going to talk about that in just a second. It is an opportunity for you to tell colleges that you have more to offer than numbers, right? When you're applying to schools, let's say that the school that you're applying to has a 25% acceptance rate, right? Keep in mind that this isn't 25% of all high school students, but 25% of students who all apply to this school because they believe they have a chance, right? So what that means is that a lot of your peers that are applying to the same colleges will sort of bring a similar profile in terms of the numbers, right? So now the next step is you have to show colleges, hey, well, beyond the numbers, right? what sort of experiences, background am I bringing where I am an asset to the community, where this college is going to give me a great education, but I am also going to benefit the college community, right? So this is where the college essays really comes in, right? The next step, which like to sort of group together, are the extracurricular activities and recommendation letters, right? Extracurricular activities essentially is everything and anything outside of the classroom. It can be clubs, organizations, athletics, the arts, internship, research, jobs, volunteer, community service, pretty much everything that you've been doing since ninth grade outside of the classroom. And it does not have to be academic, right? When colleges sort of review your application, one of the things that they look for is how long, like what sort of activities has the student, been engaged in throughout high school, how long they've been doing it, and if the student puts their mind to something, right, do they go after it, right? So even if, let's say, you're involved in an activity where it's completely unrelated to your major, right? So for example, let's say that you have been playing the piano since you were in like third grade, right? It's not like you want to become a pianist in the future, right? You want to study something more academic, but they want to see that, hey, like I started piano when I was in the third grade. I'm still continuing in high school. I'm moving up in my skill level. Perhaps I'm participating in competitions like NISMA, right? And they want to see that, hey, if I like something, I'm going to go after it and I'm going to make something out of it, right? Because what colleges see from this extracurricular activities is some level of sort of character, right? They want to see that, oh, the student could be a future leader in our country, and it will be an asset to our community. Recommendation letters. Most colleges will ask for two recommendations. Usually they will ask or require that the recommendations are from junior year teachers. Okay. And to get a little bit more specific, within your junior year teachers, we always recommend one of them be from a STEM subjects like math or science, and another be from humanities and social sciences, which may include English, history, or the foreign languages. Some schools also give students the opportunity to submit like a third recommendation, in which case this can be somebody that knows you really well, perhaps outside of school, or maybe a teacher that you may have had in maybe your sophomore year that who also happens to be sort of the advisor for one of the clubs that you're like the president of, right? Not all schools offer it, but it is always nice to have this sort of third option available. And the last is the interest shown, right? As early as you discover a school that you think may be a school that you want to apply to, learn more about the school, right? Not just limited to campus tours and information sessions, but every opportunity you have to gain more knowledge about the school, I want you to do it, right? Are there alums around you who have attended that university, right? Talk to them, right? What about, online resources, right? Especially these days, right? You can find so much information just by going on like YouTube or College Confidential or Reddit, right? There's a lot of different platforms that will give you more and more information about the school. And this is sort of the last piece that colleges look for in the application, right? If you are applying to that school, they want to see that you've demonstrated interest over the years. So let's talk a little bit about the admissions essays. So when you're applying to colleges, most students begin by working on the Common Application, which is an application platform that over 700 colleges in the US currently use. Now, there are some schools that are not a part of the Common Application, and these schools will often use either the Coalition Application, which is another application platform, or a few schools have applications of their own, namely places like Georgetown and a lot of the state schools like the University of California schools have an application platform of their own. Now, regardless of the application platform, a college application typically is split up into the personal statement. Some people call it the main essay, which is an essay that gets sent to every college that you will be applying to from that platform, right? So let's say you're applying to 10 colleges via the common application. That personal statement will be sent to all 10 of those schools. Now, supplemental essays are specific to each school, right? And what it should do is nicely supplement, right? Provide support for whatever you discuss in your main essay. Depending on the school, some schools will have no supplemental essays, like a school like Wesleyan, for example, does not have any supplemental essays, right? Whereas on the flip side, a school like Wake Forest has like 7 supplemental essays, right? So on average, you'll see about 2 to 3 supplemental essay of varying lengths per school. So if you are looking to apply to, let's say, 10 to 12 schools, which is sort of the average number of schools. Just be prepared that as soon as junior year finishes, between, let's say, July and when the regular decisions are due, which is January 1st, you are looking to compose about 30 essays of varying lengths. Now, remember that college essays are your chance to tell colleges more about who you are, right? When, this is more for our students who are attending the webinar right now, but when you're trying to think of the sort of topic to write about, right? I want you guys to think less about what's going to impress the admissions officers, but asking yourself more about what matters to you, right? Whether that is related to a passion of yours that's academic or non-academic, right? Or whether that's related to your background, right? Your upbringing, your ethnicity, right? The specific situation that you grew up in. Perhaps you've gone through some setbacks or challenges in your life that has really, helped you grow as a person, right? Think about what matters to you, right? Without thinking about, college, right? Just begin by jotting down everything and anything that you can think of that really matters to you, right? Because a story that comes from your heart, right? That's what's going to sort of persuade the admissions officer, hey, like, we would love to have this student at our community. It seems like this student is exactly the type of student we are looking for, right? In your essays, right? Perhaps maybe not in your personal statement because it is, again, going to be sent to every school, but in your supplemental essays, don't be afraid to kind of boast a little bit, right? It's an opportunity for you to tell them about all the different things that you have done throughout high school, right? Whether that be extracurriculars, whether that's something more academic, and you want to show them, hey, I've done all of these things, and your school has all of these things, we're going to be a great match, right? So the supplemental essays will be a chance for you to really, talk about your academic interests and goals, right? But, in writing this, in composing your application, don't overthink, right? But don't underthink either, right? A great place, a great way to write, I think, is in the beginning, I like to just, for me at least, I majored in English and philosophy in college. When I try to write essays, I like to first begin by just like taking out my phone and just start talking to my phone and recording what I'm saying out loud. Because sometimes when you're just staring at a blank document on your computer, you may have a brain fart, right? Your brain may freeze and you may not know literally what to write. But talking out loud sometimes is a little bit easier, right? So in the beginning, just try to say things and then listen back on what you said and translate that over to paper, and then you can begin crafting that. But start early, right? As you will be going through many different drafts, right? And give yourself plenty of time to go through a multiple revisions. Um, let's talk a little bit about interest and value, right? So, when we are trying to apply to colleges, right? It's almost like a matchmaking process, right? You want to show colleges, hey, I did A, B, and C things throughout high school. I want to study this. Your school can do this for me. And at the same time, right? I can offer X, Y, and Z things, right, that will help me be a valuable member to to your college community, right? It is a matchmaking process, and you need to persuade them that this is going to be mutually beneficial, right? Um, when you are, composing your application, right? Think about sort of the theme that you are creating for yourself, right? Colleges want active and involved students, right? We want to see that your application holistically points to a common theme where we are painting a certain narrative for yourself about who you are, right? We want to make sure that what you want to study is consistent with the types of extracurricular activities that you've been a part of, the type of person that you're painting out to be in your essays, and your teacher recommendations, right? You want to make sure to talk to your teachers in advance so that your teachers also support this theme that you're creating for yourself, right? Colleges are looking for, leaders who bring really positive character attributes who will be an asset to their community. So just keep that in mind. Finally, if you are a rising senior, this is just a general thing to keep in mind that over the summer, right, this is where we want to be the most productive out of any of the summers in our high school journey, right? Apart from working on your college applications and essays, you also want to keep yourself busy by being involved in perhaps a competitive summer program. Maybe you found an internship, maybe you found a job, right? Regardless of what it is, we want to see that you've spent a very productive summer, right? And also, because senior year tends to get very busy in the fall semester, summer is a great opportunity for you to, make a great deal of progress in your application, right? So at the very least, I like to have my students complete most of their early applications over the summer so that the fall can be spent working on the regular decision applications. Now, in the fall, right, if you still need to take the SAT or ACT, keep in mind that for early schools, whether that's ED, early decision, or EA, early action, the last sort of SAT date that you can take advantage of is the October administration. And for the ACT, it's typically the September administration, right? Exams that are later in the fall are still okay for schools you are applying through the regular round. But for the earlies, just keep in mind that this will be sort of your last shot, right? Once the school year resumes and you've officially begun senior year, make sure you schedule regular meetings with your school counselor, who, by the way, also has to write you a recommendation, right? And make sure that your teachers who should have received the recommendation letter requests over the summer are staying on top of it and understand the deadlines for the schools that you're applying to. Because while most of the early schools have a November 1st deadline, there are some schools that are October 15th deadline. And I know we didn't talk about this too much, but a few schools have what's called a rolling admission, which is a first come, first serve type of admission, right? So if you are applying to a rolling admission school and you're planning on submitting it October 1st, you want to make sure that the teacher recommendations are in. Now, if FAFSA, financial aid, is also something that you are trying to apply for, then this is again more for the parents. We need to do this towards the summer / in the fall semester. Now in the winter, now here we're talking about sort of like November, December, right? Again, you can still take the SAT or ACT for the schools that you will be applying in the regular decision. And January 1st, January 15th will mainly be the deadlines for the regular decision applications. And if you are deferred to a school and later on you're waitlisted to a school, it's also a good opportunity for you to compose what we call the letter of continued interest, where you send an additional letter to the school, giving them an update on your senior year, telling them a little bit more about why you really want to attend the institution and why you will be an asset, right? So what that means is a lot of seniors, when they enter spring semester, they sort of kind of drop the ball and they don't study as hard, but it is Really, really important because colleges will receive your final transcript upon graduation. And we have seen cases in which colleges take away an admission spot because the grades drop too much. And also, like I said, if you are waitlisted, you want to demonstrate that your GPA has been continuously rising. Right. So and just make sure that you finish strong until you graduate.
All right, thanks, Jay. Now it's my portion of the presentation today. We're going to talk about standardized tests and how these things fit into the admissions process. I mean, there's lots of different factors that go into a student's application. Standardized tests are still one of them. I mean, they are not and never have been, by the way, as important as your GPA or your class rigor, but they are very important. As Jay mentioned earlier with his funnel or I guess inverted pyramid analogy, they are near the top. Like they're sort of as he referred to it, the admission ticket, the thing you have to, um, you have to sort of pass step one in order to get, into the next sort of round of the admissions process where they start looking at your essays and want to get to know you a little bit better. Standardized tests are that sort of like front gate. They are considered by many to be the third most important factor in college admissions. Now, a lot of colleges still are test optional, as I'm sure many of you know here. That during the pandemic back in 2020, a vast majority of American colleges went test optional because students just could not sit for SATs or ACTs. Now that we're out of the pandemic, many colleges have remained test optional. Many colleges are, still sort of in this temporary test optional state. And I would just say this, just generally as a general rule, for the colleges that were like that had to go test optional, were forced into it by COVID. Um, and didn't have many years of experience doing this in admissions prior to 2020. Um, Even the ones that are still test optional now, their test scores are still like a significantly important part of their admissions process. We're seeing a lot of these schools go back to test required. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. But even the ones that have remained test optional or are still temporarily so, we are finding that standardized test scores are still very important factors at those schools. Um, Standardized test scores have always been and are still incredibly important at competitive schools. So like US News Top 100 schools, and then larger schools too, generally schools that get more applicants. And who have to reject, unfortunately, more applicants as well. So you're talking about your really big state schools that are very competitive state schools. There's a lot of those now, as Jay mentioned earlier. They're becoming very, very popular. And then, of course, your super competitive colleges that accept, you know, 25% of their applicants. A good standardized test score is important for a school like that, even if they are test optional. Now, I did want to quickly just discuss the sort of three different types of test policies that colleges have in America. I mean, the first one is test required, which is, pretty standard. They require that you send them a test score of some kind. Now, if it's test required, that's generally SAT or ACT. You are required to send them a score from one of those two American standardized tests. Um, if they're test flexible, what that means is that you don't have to send them an SAT or ACT score, but you do need to send them some sort of standardized test score as part of your application. So, like Yale, for example, is test flexible, and they require either SAT or ACT or standardized test scores from AP exams or IB exams for admission. You got to send them something, though. For test optional schools, and this is again the majority of schools in America now, many of them temporarily test optional, many of them permanently test optional. For these schools, you do not have to submit a test score from the SAT, the ACT, AP exams, or IB exams in order to be considered for admission. Now, of course, as I mentioned, at a lot of these schools, a good test score is a boon to you and your application, but you do not need to submit something test score wise in order to like have them look at the rest of your application. And then the last one is test blind or test free, sometimes referred to. These are schools are interesting. At these schools, they do not accept standardized test scores at all. Like they will not take an SAT score from you. They will not take an ACT score from you, even if you wanted to show them your ACT or SAT scores. So there are a number of schools in the country like this, not very many. Again, the vast majority of schools fall into that middle test optional category. You have some test required. That pool is growing a little bit. As we sort of exit the pandemic here. And then, of course, you have your test blind schools, which are there are very few of those. But the big, sort of important schools that are test blind are the California public schools. So that's the University of California, state school system. You're talking about UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Santa Cruz. All the UC schools are test blind, as are the Cal State state schools out there as well. And then, of course, there are a few other colleges and universities around the country that are test blind as well, but the UCs and the Cal State system are the sort of biggest and most important ones that are. So yeah, I did already mention this, but I do want to put a finer point on this. That scores do very much still matter at competitive schools. I mean, look, Jay outlined this earlier in the discussion. Competitive colleges have only gotten more and more competitive admissions wise. I mean, more and more students are applying to college now, and they are not adding any more seats. And even at test optional schools, if they are competitive, like you want to do anything in your power to like you know to convince the school that you are academically ready for their institution. And the other issue here, the thing that like colleges are sort of I would not say working against, but they have to deal with on a yearly basis with their admissions processes is the problem of grade inflation. Grade inflation has become a serious issue in America and American high schools. Um, across the country, it is much easier now to get an A or like a B plus in a class than it used to be 30, 40 years ago. And because of that, like the average GPA of an American high school student has risen precipitously. I think right now the average GPA is like an A. For an American student. So like when you're trying to sift through and differentiate between thousands of applicants who all have GPAs that are within a tenth of a point of one another, another number is going to help you stand out. And also, a standardized test score is extra helpful to these colleges because, it's hard to determine what an A means at, 1,000 different American high schools and times that by an order of magnitude larger number of like teachers who all have their different grading rubrics and standards and stuff with a standardized test like the SAT or the ACT or AP exams and IB exams. Those tests are the same for all students who take them. So, I mean, that's the utility of the standardized test. And I think that, now colleges are, I mean, many of them at least, competitive ones for sure, colleges that get a lot of submissions and unfortunately have to reject a lot of students. They're relying more and more on these standardized metrics to help them differentiate between all of the students that they have to whose applications that they have to evaluate. Um, and then, of course, I did mention this a few minutes ago, but like I think we are now seeing a return sort of across the country to test required, to colleges going back from their temporarily test optional, stances that they had to take as a result of the pandemic, to now requiring SAT and ACT for submission again. I think all of the Ivy League schools now are back to requiring the test. Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Um, Okay. Yeah, all of the Ivy League schools are back to requiring the test. A lot of the like Ivy League adjacent schools are, requiring testing again. It's not limited to like the most competitive schools either. I mean, we've seen a number of like larger state schools also go back to requiring the test. Ohio State was, I think, the most recent sort of big state school that went back to requiring testing. Of course, last year we had. University of Texas at Austin. You've got some private schools, like, especially private schools that are popular in this area, like University of Miami, Carnegie Mellon, going back to requiring tests. It's definitely something that is happening. I do think you're going to find that a majority of the schools that are currently test optional will remain test optional at least for another year. But I think that, like, as we get further and further away from the pandemic and colleges, you know, have more and more trouble and continue to sort of see these challenges and deal with these challenges of the increasing numbers of applicants. Many of them are going to continue to go back to requiring test scores. I mean, that's just sort of the lay of the land now. This is a list of some testing required schools, and, like, I mean, you'll see here many of these schools are, of course, the very competitive and selective colleges, like your Brown University, all of the Ivy League schools, the te- uh, what's it called? State schools that are incredibly competitive to get into, like, University of Texas at Austin is incredibly difficult to get into. Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, difficult to get into. But a larger state school as well. And then you've got other schools on here that are not particularly selective, but have also gone back to requiring tests. I mean, for a variety of reasons. It could be that they want to maintain standards at their schools and they feel like they cannot do so in a test optional environment. Um, I mean, places like Louisiana Tech, for example, Tennessee State, nothing against those schools, but I mean, they are not in the US News top 20. Again, I think that this is going to be a trend, unfortunately, that continues over, the next few years as, again, we get further away from the pandemic. I did want to also address a question that I get a lot from people. I talk to people about the SAT and the ACT all the time. Um, they are, coming to us asking us, like, what we can do to, do well on this test and help my son or daughter best position themselves for that part of the college admissions process. The One of the questions I get asked all the time is, do colleges, like certain colleges in the country, have a preference for one of these two tests or the other? Do they want me to send them scores from both the SAT and the ACT? Does it matter which college I apply to if I'm taking the SAT, or which colleges I'm going to be applying to if I'm taking the ACT? The answer is no. Colleges are across the board completely agnostic with respect to the SAT versus the ACT. At least American colleges are. They do not care whether you've taken an SAT and got a great score on that test, or whether you've taken the ACT and gotten a great score on that test. So that's why, one of our big philosophies is you determine from the get-go which of these two tests you're naturally better at, and then you focus on preparing for that particular test. This should not be a part of your college admissions calculus, determining which tests to prepare for based on the schools that you are interested in. Jay gave you a timeline a few minutes ago for senior year. I'm going to give you guys a timeline for junior year, a testing specific timeline for junior year. If you are a sophomore now going into junior year and you're planning, your test prep and academics for junior year, the general sort of cadence, the things that we recommend that you do are, we recommend that you first start out with a diagnostic test. So we have this SAT ACT diagnostic test that does help you determine which of those two tests you're naturally better suited to. It gives you a starting score on both of the tests, and it tells you what your major strengths and weaknesses are across all of the subjects of both of those tests. Strongly recommend starting there. I love our test, but you can take a full-length SAT and a full-length ACT and get the same amount of data with a little bit more time and effort in doing that. But definitely start out with something of that sort so that you know what you need to do and how much you're going to need to improve to get your score where you want it to be for the schools that you are interested in. You should also, at the same time, consider where you might want to go to college and what that college's stance is on standardized testing. I mean, listen, if you're just applying to California state schools, then there is no reason for you to take or, prepare for the SAT or the ACT. Likely, though, there are going to be a number of test optional schools that you're going to be interested in. There are going to be likely a number of test preferred schools. This is sort of like the flavor of test optional that we find many schools fit into nowadays, where they technically it's optional, but they kind of prefer that you send them your scores. You're probably going to be, interested in applying to a couple of test required schools as well. Determine what kinds of scores you're going to want to get to be a competitive applicant for those kinds of schools, your test optional, test preferred schools, your test required schools. You can find those, by the way, on the Common Data Set or just by doing a quick Google search for the college and SAT or ACT scores. And once you've done that, you should then create and execute on a prep plan to try to improve your scores to where you want them to be. Of course, you're more than welcome to reach out to us to help discuss that with you. But generally, for most kids, you're going to need about 4 to 5 months to really maximize your score and learn as much as you can and master the test that you are preparing for. Some students don't need that much. I mean, some kids are kind of naturals at this test and they come in and score a 1450 on the SAT right out of the gate. And for those kids, they might not need any prep at all. Some people need a little bit more than just a 4 or 5 month period if they're not really natural test takers, but most people fall into around a 4 or 5 month period of like concerted effort where you're really trying to learn the test and get better at it every single week. All right. So, with all of that said, we wanted to give you guys a few sort of next steps, things that we think you should be doing on your own as part of your college admissions process and your test prep process, and then, ways that we might be able to help you. And then, of course, we're going to get into questions. So, generally, next steps for all of you who are here on the call tonight. Number one, most important thing are your numbers, your GPA, your course rigor, your standardized test scores, and really number one is the GPA and the course rigor. So please do whatever you can to maintain the best grades you possibly can in school, like throughout your high school career. Try to avoid dips in your high school career, like where your grades start to suffer a little bit. If you got off to a rocky start at the beginning of your freshman year or, all of freshman year, it's okay. You can sort of make up for that with a great sophomore year, great junior year, but the trend line needs to be up. It cannot be going down by the time your applications are due as a senior. Number two, research colleges. It's never too early to start this. Even if you're a ninth grader, like getting the information now is going to help you. When you're researching, you are not making any commitments to colleges. Um, Nothing that none of your preferences that sort of perceive or find now are set in stone. And because of that, like, you should be exploring this now, sort of just get into the ecosystem, no matter what grade you are in school at this moment. If, you're a little bit further along in the process, let's say you're a junior, or even for some sophomores, like a little bit of an extra credit project might be to plan a trip to a nearby college, a couple of different nearby colleges that are sort of like, fall under different categories. One large state school, maybe you take a trip down to Rutgers, New Brunswick, if you're in New Jersey, to check out what that school looks like and feels like. Maybe you take a trip to a smaller private college, maybe something selective, maybe something a little bit less so, maybe urban, and just sort of like walk around, get a feel for it. Again, try to, I think, just ensconce yourself a little bit more into the college life and campus life and get a better sort of just get your mind into it, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. Um, if you are a junior now, you want to be definitely trying to get a good score on the SAT or ACT, unless testing is just not for you and you're going to be applying to all test blind or test optional schools. If you're a sophomore now, you want to be thinking about your test prep plan. We do think that a vast majority of sophomores should plan to um, at the very least, dip your toe into the water of testing and test prep. So take a diagnostic test, see where you come out on that, have a consultation, with us or somebody else to get a sense of like what it would take to get your score to where you might want it to be. If you're taking any AP exams this May, make sure you're doing whatever you can to do well on those tests. As we mentioned earlier, some colleges will even use those for admission. But for, all colleges, it's not just for college credit anymore. They want to see not only that you get a good grade in that class, but that you get a good score on the AP exam as well. So those are going to be very important if you're taking those this May. And then just generally, be as good of a student as you can possibly be, right? Like be an active member and participant in your classes. Try to build relationships with your teachers, and your counselors, your mentors, both in school and in the community. Get involved in sports and extracurriculars. Like just try to be an active member of your high school community. The more you can do that, the better it's gonna, like, I mean, of course, it's gonna make you a better applicant. On your applications when the time comes. It's also just going to make it's going to enrich your life even more, and you're going to be, significantly more fulfilled. If that sounds corny, if you do all of that. And then, oh, lastly, for juniors, I did want to mention, this is the spring of your junior year. Your personal statement and obviously the rest of the essays you're going to be writing for college, you're going to be doing those over the summer and into the fall. It's a good time now, especially if you are done with like SAT and ACT testing, you don't have a ton else on your plate. Start brainstorming your personal statement. Now, you're going to need to have a personal statement no matter which colleges you're applying to. Start brainstorming that, start crafting it now. It takes a while to do. And it's one of those things where, like, you can't just whip it out in a couple of days and expect it to be something that is like convincing and good and meaningful to a reader. It's going to take some real deep mining down into yourself to be able to, like, you know, find the thing that you're going to want to write about. So start thinking about that now, I would say. The next steps for us, the ways in which we can help you. Of course, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you'd like to discuss college advising with us or tutoring of any kind. Jay is happy to do consultations with you. I'm happy to do consultations with you. We're all happy to, discuss how we can help with all of these things. Um, if you are a sophomore or a junior and you're considering, or even a freshman considering tutoring, if you're considering test prep as a sophomore or a junior, again, please feel free to reach out to us to discuss a plan for that or how we can help you with your academics. We have tutors who work with students on pretty much every high school academic subject that there is, so please feel free to reach out if you're having any trouble with any of those subjects. And then if you're planning your summer, plan to maybe take one of our summer programs. We do, like, every year run a few short, like week-long or 2-week-long classes and boot camps. This year we're going to be doing a college application boot camp in early August. We're going to be doing SAT and ACT boot camps like periodically. Actually, we're doing one at the end of this month and beginning of May. We're doing one at the end of June and an SAT one and an ACT one in August as well. And then we're also going to be doing an Algebra 2 for test prep boot camp this summer. So for anyone who wants to get started on their test prep, but you're not quite math ready yet, take that class with us and we will get you where you need to be in math to be able to start your SAT or ACT prep. But that about does it for our formal presentation. We will now open it up to questions. I think a couple came in already. Let me pull these up. Yes, there's a couple of Q&As. All right. So the first question, Jay, was, is there one or two websites which have all the common data set info? I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because it's almost like a yes and no. So in on Google, if you type in common data set repository, they're like basically the first link that comes up. I believe it's like collegetransitions.com/ something something something. It's a website that basically has like a record, or rather, I should say, the link to the different schools' websites where you can find the common data set. So it's kind of like, yes, there's a website where it can lead you to the individual school's website, but it's not really any different than on Google just typing in, let's say, like, I don't know, U of Maryland common data set, and then clicking on the first link that pops up. So it's
Yeah,
like a, yeah,
that's my method.
yeah.
I put
So
that into the chat earlier. That's how I do it.
yeah, I would say that is in some ways going to be more convenient, especially if you know which colleges, you're currently interested in. So Google, I would say, triumphs the Common Data Set repository because the Common Data Set Initiative website does not give you that information nor the link to to find the common data set. So it's actually not a very helpful website. Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. So the next question is, are there any schools that require you to submit every iteration of the standardized test that you take?
Yes. So the sort of different policies that colleges have around standardized exams. Some schools are based on what we call self-reporting, where in your application you indicate yourself what you claim to have scored on a particular test or across multiple sittings. And you only need to send a score verification once you are admitted to the school. So the idea is they're trying to help you save money by not having to submit the official score report from when when your application is simply being reviewed and you're not even accepted yet. Now, there are some schools where they allow you to super score or do score choice, but they do need you to submit the official score report as a part of the application review process. And then to go back to this question, there are a few schools that require you to submit every single exam that you've taken. So what that means is if you've taken the SAT, hopefully not, but if you've taken it like 7 times, right? There are a few schools that require you to submit all of them. Some examples are schools like Georgetown is a famous one. Another well-known one is Syracuse, which I know is also a very popular destination for a lot of our students. They do require that you submit everything. So unless you are ready to take it, do not take it just for the heck of it.
Yeah. It also like doesn't help a student's confidence to go in there kind of,
Yes.
you know, before you're ready to take it and take it, you have a bad experience, it can really set you back.
Yep.
Um, but all right, great. So that was the next question. The next question is, what's the criteria and word count with respect to, or between, I guess, the personal statement and the supplemental essay?
Yeah, so as far as last year is concerned, well, technically the applications didn't launch right for this upcoming year, but they do stay consistent for the most part. But the Common App personal statement from when I was in high school, the word limit was 650. For the main personal essay. For the coalition application, it's 550 words. For the UC schools, which have their own essays, you have to write 4 essays that are limited to 350 words each. And then supplemental essays really depend on the specific college and the specific prompt. We've seen essays as short as 35 words. We've also seen essays as long as 650 words. So it really depends, but on average, I want to say about 250 to 300 is sort of the bulk of the supplemental essay topics. But again, it does really sort of depend. By the way, 650 words, we're thinking approximately a page and a half to 2 pages. And then, 350 words is, I want to say, about three standard length paragraphs.
Great. Next question, is there a specific type of personality that colleges look for? And if so, how can you show this in an essay?
Ooh, that is a tricky question, and perhaps that's the reason why a lot of students and families come to us, right? So, yes, I mean, maybe some people, some counselors, some adults may disagree on this, but I truly believe that there are certain personalities that colleges look for, specifically in relation to the type of school that they believe that they are. Right. So, some schools, for example, may look for a student who has a single passion, and they've really gone after that, throughout high school, right? Whereas there may be some colleges that look for students with a multitude of interests, and they are looking for students who want a double major, maybe even ambitiously triple major, and they're like getting in themselves involved in as many different activities as they can, and just want to live that very busy life, right? So depending on the school, I think there's certainly different like education philosophies that different colleges have, right? So one of the things that I encourage students to do, and one of the advantages of starting your application early, is that you really get the opportunity to individualize your applications to the specific needs and specific sort of styles of the schools that you're applying to. Now, as far as how you can show this in an essay, I mean, I think that is a conversation that's going to be much longer, right? I mean, it starts from, the brainstorming part, right? About what topic you're going to write about, right? And then, for the personal statement, at least, I don't think that you should be painting specifically a very specific personality that's only going to cater to a particular set of schools. I think supplemental essays will be where through research, right, you can write about things that you think are, what the colleges are looking for.
Cool.
But yeah,
Very good.
I hope that answered it.
No, it was good. I informative for me at least. The last question, how do top colleges treat applications from students who are undecided about their major?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really great question because oh, okay. So I'm gonna split it into two parts. One, what I will say is that in many schools, you don't actually have to declare your major until your sophomore year. So what that means is what you indicate in your application as what you are hoping to study is your prospective major. Okay. So when you're writing your college application, remember we want to create a theme for it, right? So if let's say you're a sophomore or a junior and currently you're really interested in undergraduate business, right? We want to see that you've really gone after that, right? And you've furthered yourself as much as you can. And you could indicate that perhaps you want to major in economics in college, but in many schools, not all, but many schools, once you go and you decide, you know what? I really don't like economics, you can totally change the academic department. I myself is actually one of those cases. I applied to colleges indicating that I wanted to be a math and econ major, and I switched my major to English and philosophy once I got to college, which is vastly different, needless to say, right? Now, there are some students who also just indicate right off the bat in their applications that their major they're not sure what they want to study just yet, right? So if that is the case for you, right, that you want to paint your application with the theme that you are perhaps a jack of all trades, right, who have a lot of different interests, who like this, but who also like that, right? And while you're undecided, perhaps eventually, maybe you still have a vision for yourself, maybe 10 years down the line or 15 years down the line, right? So even if you don't indicate a specific academic major, right, you still can create a theme around perhaps the kind of person you want to be and how the way that you lived your high school journey sort of all points to this ambition. So there, depending on the school, there can be an advantage to indicating a specific major. But I also tell my students, if you're undecided and you want to indicate in your application that you're undecided, it is okay for most schools.
Very good. Thank you, Jay. Um, all right, great. Well, I don't think we have any more questions coming in, but I mean, guys, if any of you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact info is here on the screen. I want to thank you again all for being here on this Monday night to hear us chat about the admissions process and standardized testing. And please do reach out. Don't be a stranger. We would love to help you any way that we can. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.